It was probably an Indian settlement when Captain John Smith arrived in 1607. He did crudely map this area, and some refinements to those maps were made over the next 15 or 20 years, but a German really surveyed the whole eastern shore, and he dated his map 1670, but he actually was working from about 1660, and Oxford is the only town shown on the eastern shore at that time. And of course Baltimore was not even a gleam in anyone's eye, but by 1670 it was a trading post and ship commerce. The Calverts began to look upon this as a possible port of entry along with St. Mary's over on the western shore, and indeed by the end of the 17th century, about 1683, Oxford was made a port of entry. And so for 100 years, essentially it was a tobacco port. And it was very prosperous. And we had many, many stores. Here's a map done in 1707 with the layout of the streets, with Moore Street running down and the Strand running this way. And that's the first depiction of a Chesapeake Bay Craft, a shallow draft boat without a keel that anyone has found. That was a survey, and they began selling lots. The Revolution, of course, ended the trade with England, which was its mainstay, and it just withered away. It really, by 1800, there were probably 90 or 100 people in town. So it had to reinvent itself, and it's done that 3 and 4 or 5 times. In the 19th century, the Civil War was a boon, and then with the development of canning, they were able to can oysters, and so Oxford became not only a source of fresh oysters, which were shipped to Baltimore, but because of the sometimes lapse of time and lack of refrigeration, they canned them here. They learned the process of steaming them, pasteurizing them, and so there were any number, that's a map up there, of oyster packing houses from the time of the railroad, which was 1873, until about 1930, when the beds played out. So it had reinvented itself as a waterman's town and a seafood town. There were also, prior to the Civil War, there was a military academy over there established called the Maryland, I think, Military and Marine Academy, right. And that lasted almost up to the Civil War, and the cadets that graduated fought for both the North and the South. This was a very divided area. And then after the Civil War, as I said, oystering became, and crabbing became big business. But they tried to develop tourism. They convinced the developer to build a big hotel called the Eastford Hotel, and that just didn't work. There weren't enough tourists. And so they turned it into another military academy in the 1880s, and that lasted only about 3 years. It was horribly mismanaged. So they just kept trying things, and everybody kept thinking of Oxford as full of potential for tourism, for trade, but just nothing really seemed to work. In the 20th century, of course, it became a sailing mecca, and we had several people, Ralph Wiley, who started a boathouse here, a boatyard here in 1928, and Ralph was from Long Island, but he was a phenomenal wooden boat builder, and he built all kinds of boats up to 40, 50 feet in length, custom boats, wooden boats, and he developed the Scrappy Cat, and he built the first two comets, which were designed by a couple of friends of his here on the Tredevan River. So he built the first two comets, one of which is in the Maritime Museum in St. Michael's. And he kept trying to build formula boats. So the Star, which was developed in, I think, 1911, was the class around here. But he kept trying to build smaller ones or larger ones or faster ones or whatever to meet the demands of small boat sailors. It's shallow water here, so you know, you don't have a lot of large boats. I think 40 feet, 41 feet are about the largest that race here. But lots of small ones, the Penguin, a number of prams and others, and they had regattas every year. In that case, there are a couple of trophies that go back to 1871, 1872. There's a yacht club here that is very much focused on racing as opposed to social events. And so at this point, it's sort of reinvented itself as a sailor's mecca. And a retirement center, of course, you can't avoid that. Any